G-O-A-T-O, greatest show of all time. The Garage Mahal, like Kobe in his prime.
Welcome back, Goat fans, to another episode of the greatest of all time podcast show, Goat Radio. I'm the big man, and we have an incredible guest for you guys. Author and journalist that has worked for major media outlets, National Post, CBC, written publications for the New York Times, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star. The list goes on. And forget to mention, a passionate sports fan. She's written best-selling books called Between the Pipes. And now the sequel, Behind the Mask. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pumped to welcome Randi Druzin. Thanks for joining us, Randi.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you, get some of your experiences. You've written some amazing books, interviewed some legends and goats, and we want to hear about it. But first things first, we got to say what we're wearing. So what do you have on for us?
I'm wearing the Hockey Night in Canada t-shirt. I was going to wear my Leafs jersey, but after last night's performance, I decided against it.
I did that for you. And when I see that shirt you're wearing, and it's the old school logo, I think of Bob Cole. I think of Bob Cole.
Yes.
And the narrator for Canadians. I love that guy. And
great.
His legacy will live on for sure.
And that powder blue jacket he used to wear will also live on in our memories.
For sure. And for you, Randi,
mm-hmm.
I had to wear my classic Toronto Maple Leafs jersey. I know it's a tough time in Leaf Nation.
Yes, it definitely is, especially today after last night's performance. So I appreciate the jersey.
Yeah, and it's fitting because it's autographed by Martin Jones, one of the goalies for the Leafs. He's my former teammate, so he's a wicked guy, and they should throw him in next game. Why not?
Well, they took out Samsonov last night and put in Woll, so anything's possible. Yeah. I think they're just trying to mix it up to light a spark.
Yeah. I love how you love your hockey. You have a decorated career. Let's go back kind of your childhood. Was hockey always a passion of yours?
Oh yeah, hockey was my first love. Definitely. I remember my parents would go on their date nights on Saturdays, and the babysitter would come in. Babysitter was a huge hockey fan and got me addicted to Hockey Night in Canada. So that was the first thing I was ever really passionate about.
And if you remember, who was your idol? And did you play? I think you did play. I saw a picture.
Yeah, I did play. I started playing when I was around 8 or 9, and I continued right up to college. So I played college hockey, and now I'm too old and rickety to even think about that. But, it was really great. I loved playing, and I love watching as well.
Where did you play college?
I went to the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, which is 2 hours west of Toronto. And we had a horrible team, but we had a really good time.
Yeah.
So
you have a real decorated career in journalism. You're a real legend in the globally. You've covered so many different areas, the Olympics, some politics, some social stuff. You've even been to and covered Wayne Gretzky's last game at Maple Leaf Garden.
Oh, wow. You did some research.
I did. I had to. What for you, what's the funnest part about journalism?
I like meeting people. Like I'm really a people's person. So I like getting out, meeting new people, learning new things. I'm very inquisitive and very social. So I feel like journalism is a good fit for me in that way. For me, it's about meeting people.
Yeah. What are some, besides sports, what is your favorite thing to cover around the world?
Sorry. I'm really interested in international relations and politics and things like that. Right now, it's a really fraught time, though, with 2 wars raging and people angry. So I feel like hockey is a great escape for me, if you know what I mean. I do work with national and international news at work at the CBC on a regular basis. So when I'm not there, hockey's my release valve.
I love it. And Goat Radio doesn't tend to get political. It's just the way it is, and
Yeah.
we love. That's why a lot of viewers love us. We're neutral, but we talk goats and legends. Who doesn't like talking about the greats?
Yeah. I don't like talking about politics, so I'm happy to talk about the great hockey players.
Yeah. So I really want to focus on your Wicked books, best-selling book Between the Pipes,
Yes.
And now the sequel Behind the Mask.
Yes.
What sparked your interest in wanting to research and really find out more about these legendary goaltenders?
Well, I feel like goalies, in my opinion, are the most interesting players on the ice because of what they do and how they're wired. They're a little bit different than the other players. And in a way, the goaltender's experience of a hockey game is different than any of the other players on the ice because it's a team sport. But in many ways, in many respects, goaltending is a solitary pursuit. So it takes a special kind of person to thrive in that position. And that's why it interests me so much.
For sure. And when these books were kind of brought to our attention, I found it super interesting because from all the teams I've been on, I'm not knocking on the goalies. I loved all the goalies. I even roomed with one, but seems to be this label that they're kind of weird and or more interesting than the other players. When you've researched these dozens of goalies, what was kind of the common theme in their personalities?
Well, I feel like they're different from each other. Many of them are different from each other. But the one through line I noticed through all the goalies in this book and the last one is they have this mental toughness that's beyond belief. I mean, if you'll recall, Patrick Waugh got shelled in his last game in Montreal and demanded a trade. And then he went to Colorado and said, I'm the best goalie in the world. I'll win a cup for you. And guess what happened? He did. So I feel like it's this toughness, this ability to bounce back from setbacks and to have this incredible faith in yourself, which all the great goalies have, despite their differences.
And it's definitely the hardest position in hockey. You said it. It's a team game, but there's one position and the pressure is on another level. And
always
people might say they're kind of different or more interesting because they're so dialed in. They're so dialed in. Now, what do you think? And people always say they're weird creatures of habit. Do you have any stories of a particular goalie, like for their pregame or superstitions? Do you recall anyone that was kind of memorable in that way?
Well, there were a lot of really superstitious goalies in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but I feel like now there's not quite as much superstition because the goalies are cultivated and trained in a certain way where I feel like the truly quirky goalies maybe wouldn't survive that recruitment process or that grooming process, if you know what I mean. But in researching my book, I did come up with some great stories about Jerry Cheevers, for example. Phil Esposito was very, very superstitious about sticks, and he didn't want sticks crossed in the dressing room. So Jerry Cheevers, because he was a very relaxed, laid back, and a character, he actually took all the sticks and piled them in the middle of the room. So they look like, a pile of pickup sticks just to antagonize Esposito. So when you think of superstition, when you mentioned superstition, that's the first thing that came to my mind. It wasn't a goalie superstition, but it was a response. And I think, was it Patrick Waugh? There was a goalie in my first book who wouldn't skate over the blue line when skating around the ice, and Patrick Waugh used to talk to his goalposts. I mean, there's all sorts of interesting stories about goalies and their little quirks. And that's the primary reason that I love writing about them and enjoy writing about them.
For sure. Do you mind if I read the synopsises of both books?
Sure.
Because I think it'll give them the GOAT fans a little bit more of a cool idea of what this book's about. So this is for Between the Pipes. Some NHL goalies are great and others are intriguing, but some are legends because they're both. Glenn Hall used to wrestle with a trainer before games, and Jacques Plante refused to stay at the Royal York Hotel in Toronto. This is my favorite. Dominic Hasek loved pasta fagioli so much his goalie coach's mother made it for him whenever he was in Montreal. This book includes profiles of 12 of these mass mavericks, revealing the trait that made each one unique. And then Behind the Mask, I'll read this synopsis. This sequel to Between the Pipes includes profiles of 12 legendary NHL goalies from the past half century, emphasizing the trait that make each one unique. Roger Crozier, who suffered from nerves and stomach ailments, is featured in the book, as is Tony Esposito, a goalie whose brilliance was overshadowed by that of his famous brother. Behind the Mask also looks at contemporary goalies, such as the jovial Marc-Andre Fleury and Carey Price, who is celebrated for his stoicism and deep pride in his Indigenous background. Super cool.
Yeah, it was fun. Like I said, goalies are never boring.
For sure. And I love, Goat Radio, we do a lot of food reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And Dominic Hasek eating pasta fagioli, that caught my eye.
You have to speak to Jim Corsi, because Jim Corsi was his goalie coach, and Jim Corsi's mother, apparently a great cook. So I can connect you to Jim. Maybe you can try his mother's food as well.
Yeah, and you actually you had a good connection with a Leaf goaltender, the great Johnny Bower.
Yeah, Johnny Bower.
You call him a great goalie and a great man. Can you tell us more about him?
Yeah, I mean, he's the nicest person I've ever met. I mean, he was just amazing. I went to his house to interview him for the book, and he and his wife were so gracious, so friendly. It was just 2 weeks before Christmas. The house was red and green, the entire house. Even the bathroom had, little Santas on the counter. And then Johnny took me into into his garage and showed me a pair of his old goalie pads that he had lost years ago and were sent back to him just maybe a few years before he died, because someone found them in their basement. So the one thing I do remember about Johnny Bower is we were talking about the book, and I said to him, surprisingly, authors pay for the photos. Like, the authors themselves often have to pay for the photos in the book, and they're not cheap. So I just mentioned this in a conversation with him. A week later, I got an envelope from Johnny Bower with photos of himself to use in the book. He just sent me some photos without being prompted. So I thought, how many people would do that?
Amazing.
That was just incredible. Yeah. And everyone will tell you a great Johnny Bower story. Anyone who ever met him will tell you the same thing, that he was a really exceptionally nice person.
Yeah. And a great goaltender.
Oh yeah. He introduced the poke check. So now when you see goalies making poke checks, you know where it came from.
That is GOAT history right there. So, I'm this podcast is based out of Vancouver. We love our Canucks. I know in your most recent book, Behind the Mask, you have a profile on Roberto Luongo.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, without giving too much jam, and you want people to read your book, but anything interesting about Roberto Luongo? He's one of the greatest to goal for the Canucks.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him, and I'm sure you and every Canucks fan remembers, is his tweets, and that's the first thing that I came across in doing my research. His tweets are amazing, very entertaining. And like I said, a lot of hockey players are sort of on autopilot when they're speaking publicly. They've been media trained. They're trained not to say too much. But Luongo seems to express himself very well on Twitter, and not in a way that's monitored, by the PR department. So it's his tweets. And also, I did realize that he wanted to be a goalie right away. Like, when he was a kid, he wanted to be a goaltender from the outset. His parents discouraged him because they wanted to teach him to learn how to skate. But what happened was the goalie on his team got sick or injured. I can't remember which. And Luongo got his chance and he never came out. Like he just loved it.
Amazing.
He's a big man too, which
Yeah,
helps, right? Like a very big man.
for sure. Italian man. I wonder what his pregame meals were.
I wonder if same as Dominic Hasek's. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. I also want to touch on you covered Wayne Gretzky on his last game at Maple Leaf Garden.
Yes.
What was
That
that
was
like?
incredible.
Yeah.
That was incredible because it's Wayne Gretzky, arguably the best hockey player in history. And because he's from Ontario and the game was at Maple Leaf Gardens, which was a storied building. So it was really an exceptional night. It's one I'll never forget. And I was happy just to be in the press box that night.
Do you remember, did he get any points?
You know what? I think he did. I'll have
Yeah.
to go back and read that article again. I think he did because I remember someone beside me saying, "Of course, that's what Wayne Gretzky's going to do in his last game at Maple Leaf Gardens. He's not going to go a game without a point."
Yeah.
Just to confirm, I'll have to go back and look. That was quite a while ago that I wrote that article.
For sure. And then this generation's GOAT, Sidney Crosby.
Yes.
What was talking to him like?
Again, as I was saying, a lot of these players now are very media savvy, that they're trained. And of course, Crosby, because he was so good at such a young age, he's really a pro in terms of media training. So when I was talking to him, I could tell he was on autopilot, for all the answers. So I thought I'd throw him a curveball and I said, if there's one female celebrity you'd like to go out for lunch with, who would that be? And I could just see like there was just, oh, I'm not trained. I don't know how to respond to this question. So I actually got an honest answer out of him, and that was refreshing. So I enjoyed that interview.
What did he say?
I think his choices were Ava Mendez and Jessica Alba.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember thinking, oh, I finally got, a candid answer from him that wasn't canned and something he'd said a million times before.
Yeah, because we don't usually see that other side of the best players ever, which
very
is
rarely. But that was the whole point of my book. The whole point of the book was Behind the Mask, to show you who these people are, not just their stats. And that's why the book, it does mention or does talk about the really significant stats, but that's not the focus of the book. The focus is the personalities and who these people are when they're off the ice. And even when they're on the ice behind the mask, I'm kind of introducing readers to what's going on in their heads.
I absolutely love it. And you can find your book. Goat Radio is going to get theirs pretty soon. We ordered both of them and we can find them. Where can we find your books so you can let everybody know?
Well, it's everywhere. I mean, it's in stores, where you'd go to buy books, but it's also on Amazon. It's on Indigo, Barnes and Noble. And my publisher, Greystone, also has a link to purchase that way. So it's fairly easy to find. It wasn't just before Christmas, much to my chagrin. Amazon ran out of stock and didn't replenish their supply fast enough. So people were going Christmas shopping a week before Christmas, and my book wasn't available until January. So that was something that I was upset about.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And there's more information on you, www.druzin.com. That's DRUZIN.com.
Yes.
So, Randy, I want to do some GOAT rapid fire with you. Okay.
Uh-oh.
So
okay.
You can give me your answer. You can expand if you want to, or you can say next question. Are you ready?
Okay.
Think so. Let's GOAT. What is your nickname?
Druzy.
Druzy. McDavid, aka McJesus, or Nathan McKinnon?
Oh, I'm taking a pass on that one. I don't want to start any fights.
All right. William Nylander or Elias Pettersson?
I have to go with Nylander. I'm still a Toronto fan for emotional reasons.
Okay. The Norris Trophy is the best defenseman in the regular season.
Right.
This year is a debate. Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar?
I would go with Quinn Hughes, I think.
Okay.
But it is tough, and I know I'm going to alienate some people with that pick, but that's what I would go with.
Yeah, awesome. Patrick Roy or Marty Brodeur? Here's the bobblehead of Marty.
I would say Patrick Waugh. As good as Brodeur is, I would say Patrick Waugh. And I often get into this debate, Hasek versus Waugh, with
Oh,
another hockey writer, Todd Deno. He's a huge Patrick Waugh fan, and I'm always saying, I think Hasek doesn't get enough credit because there was method to his madness, and he won a boatload of Vezinas for a reason.
100%. I totally agree with you. He's severely underrated.
Yeah, I feel like he is in Canada and the US, but if you go to the Czech Republic,
Mhm.
he's not underrated at all. Like he could probably run for prime minister and get elected there.
Wow. Okay. Your favorite all-time female sports athlete?
Oh, that's really good. Like any sport.
Anything.
Well, Haley Wickenheiser is up there, obviously, for obvious reasons, but there's some really great sprinters, like really, really good sprinters that I've loved watching at the Olympics. Flojo was great. I know, there's talk about her being, on steroids and whatnot, but she was naturally talented as well. And she was amazing to watch. Like watching women with blazing speed is awe-inspiring. So I would say Haley Wickenheiser and any one of the top sprinters in the world.
I love that answer. All right. If LeBron James wins another championship, is he the GOAT?
I think Michael Jordan is the GOAT in basketball. I don't think a lot of people would disagree with me.
Well said.
There might be one or two Wilt Chamberlain fans out there, but I think the consensus is Jordan.
Yeah. If Cristiano Ronaldo wins this year's Euro Cup, is the GOAT debate back on the table with Messi?
I don't think that debate's ever going away. I mean, my 7-year-old nephew has that debate with his friends in the second grade. So the debate, reaches far and wide, and I don't think it will go away. They're both
Awesome.
phenomenal players. But when people talk about the greatest, there's always a generational bias. Like we can have the Patrick Waugh, Dominic Hasek, Martin Brodeur debate, but who has seen Terry Sawchuk play in person? How do we know he wasn't the greatest of all time? So we can't really say if we haven't seen players from previous generations playing. So it's hard to say, but you can say who's the greatest of all time in your memory or in our memory. That's much easier to do, but you can't compare Barry Bonds to Babe Ruth. And that was going on for a while.
Wow, you need to be a GOAT radio host. You know your
I don't know.
criteria.
I'm not professional enough.
Novak Djokovic, Rafa Nadal, or Roger Federer?
Oh, I know a lot of people will go with Djokovic, but I have to go with Federer. I mean, so good for so long and so classy.
The magician.
Yes.
Okay, we love our wrestling, Randy.
I can see that.
Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, or Stone Cold Steve Austin?
I have to confess right now, I'm not a wrestling fan, but I'm looking over your shoulder and I'm thinking Steve Austin. Not to be confused with the Steve Austin from the $6 Million Man.
Yeah.
Another famous Steve Austin, but I confess I haven't watched wrestling. I know who the main stars are, of course, as everyone does, but I don't really watch.
Yeah.
Please don't hold that against me.
Oh, no worries. Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler?
Oh, Will Ferrell.
Oh,
Like on my for this book, I created my own sports website because Druzin.com is everything I do, including music, politics, whatever. But I created a site just for my sports work, Randi.ca. And in my introduction about myself, I do mention that I love Will Ferrell and I love Will Ferrell movies.
Yeah.
And I like more cowbell.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. Okay.
He's great. He's really good.
Yeah.
Talladega Nights, classic.
Oh, yeah. One of the greats. The goaltender that was most wild.
On the ice or off the ice?
Off the ice.
Ed Belfour. Do you remember the story about him wrestling with some cops at a hotel in Dallas? That's pretty wild.
Can you please share that with us? Because I don't know this.
Oh yeah. When I was researching the first book and Ed Belfour is an interesting character. I can in a minute tell you about my experience with him, but I think for a while he was a little bit off the rails in his personal life. And one incident was at a hotel, I think it may have been in Dallas, where he had a little bit too much to drink and ended up wrestling with some police officers.
Oh,
That was pretty wild.
that
And
is.
I mean, Terry Sawchuk, who played, he played like 40s, 50s, 60s. He was phenomenal, but he had some demons and he was a little bit out of control off the ice. He died in 1970 at the age of 40 after having a physical fight with one of his teammates who he was living with that summer. So Terry Sawchuk, also an interesting character off the ice.
Beautiful. What was your most memorable interview? We might already talk about it.
Yeah, that interview with Crosby was memorable because of that one question I asked him. I really enjoyed talking to Dominic Hasek. I did my interview when he was in town in Toronto for a card show. And I was really surprised. Like, he's not just interested in hockey. We talked a lot about the Euro, about Czech history and economics. And I was just really surprised. And I believe he also mentioned that he likes to play chess. And we spoke about that a little bit. So that was a great interview. But I mean, all these guys have something interesting about them. It's just the ones that kind of tickled my fancy a little bit are the ones I remember, like Hasek and like Crosby.
Yeah.
I
Awesome.
mean, I interviewed Jonathan Taves and he was great, but he didn't say anything that made me laugh. So,
Well,
you know,
we all know Captain Serious.
very, very serious. But he did smile, and he smiled because I asked him about Marc-Andre Fleury, and everyone loves Marc-Andre Fleury. So, oh, and Marc-Andre Fleury is kind of interesting off the ice as well. He has a reputation for being a practical joker with his teammates. I think not so long ago, he filled one of his teammates' cars with styrofoam peanuts.
Yeah, I actually saw that, and I think he took the wheels off of the car also, like
Yes.
last couple weeks.
Yeah, I guess when you have millions of dollars, having
Yeah.
having tires put on and off your car is not a huge inconvenience.
For sure. Who would you want to interview if you can choose anybody in the future?
Oh, well, there's a lot of like deceased hockey players I would love to interview. We'll never have the chance. For example, Tony Esposito. I was looking forward to talking to him. Unfortunately, he died, while I was researching the book. I'll tell you one thing. I would love to interview Daryl Sittler, who was my childhood hero in the 70s. But I think I'd be terrified because he was my childhood hero. And when you meet your childhood hero and they don't live up to expectations, the kid in you is sort of deflated. So Daryl Sittler, I'd love to interview him, but I think I'd also be afraid to interview him.
Why is he your hero? What did he do for you?
Well, like my earliest hockey memory is watching him.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I was like 5 or 6 years old when I watched him. And I mean, he was everything in Toronto. He was a great leader. He was a great player. He was really popular with the fans. And he did a lot of charity events. Like, he was just a good community member in Toronto. But it's that 10-point night. It was my 10-point night against the Bruins. I hate to say that word today, but the Bruins. And I remember watching that. I remember my parents letting me stay up late past my bedtime to watch that game. And from then on, it's all been about Daryl Sittler.
Awesome. You know what? The Leafs are not out of it.
I think they are. And I say this as a longtime Leafs fan. They played with no passion last night. At least it looked that way to me. And to see them quarreling with each other on the bench,
That was a tough
not
scene.
Not confidence inspiring. Not confidence inspiring. So I mean, I'm hoping for the best, but bracing for the worst.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of the playoffs, last question. Who's winning the Stanley Cup?
Florida.
Wow.
I think Florida. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do I want to win the Stanley Cup? Not Florida.
Yeah.
But I think they will. I really do. I think they have all the ingredients.
They're a heavyweight squad. And Randy, with that, I have to take a drink for you. What a great conversation we had. And you've
What's the drink? Is it vodka or water?
It's a 9 a.m. Casadores tequila.
Oh, it's even better.
Yeah.
You know what? I should have taken the tequila before this interview, and it would have been way more interesting
Yeah.
for you.
No, it was super cool to get to know all these goalies and their traits, and I can't wait for the book to come in. You're a great journalist and, an amazing author, and
Oh, thank you.
continued success. And let's do this again.
I'd love to. I'd love to talk about generational bias and
Yeah,
greatness.
that's a good one. Cheers to you, Randy.
Thank you. Is there a worm in there?
No.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I'll hold you to that. We'll connect again. Okay.
Thank you very much. I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Randy. This is the greatest of all time podcast show, Goat Radio. We will see you next time for more Goat history. We'll see you later.